It's funny how the most ridiculous things, like a baby name, can become the tipping point in a relationship. But I guess it's never really just about the name. It's everything that name represents. Control. Grief. Ego. Love. Entitlement. I'm still not sure which of those things drove my sister to do what she did, but I know it shattered something between us. Before I get into it, I should start with some context. My name's Anna. I'm 33, married to my husband Ben, and we just had our first baby 3 months ago. A little girl named Eliana Grace. She's perfect. Everything about her, from her sleepy little smiles to the way she furrows her brow like a tiny philosopher, feels like magic. But I can't even say her name out loud without thinking of what happened. Without feeling a pang of betrayal. Growing up, my sister Rachel and I were close, at least on the surface. She's 2 years older than me. Always louder, more confident, more in charge. My parents used to joke that Rachel was the boss of the family, and I guess we all kind of went along with that. I was the quieter one, more cautious, more eager to keep the peace. Rachel never really grew out of that in-charge role. She's a force, one of those people who fills every room with her opinions and her energy, whether you're ready for it or not. Sometimes it's amazing, like when she's organizing a family event or helping someone out of a jam. Other times, it feels suffocating. Like she doesn't know where she ends and everyone else begins. I always thought I could live with it. Maybe that's just what having a strong personality is. You make space for it, right? Until suddenly, there's no space left for you. When I got pregnant, Rachel was over the moon. She cried when I told her. She started knitting little booties before I even had a bump. She offered to throw my baby shower, and I agreed, thinking it would make her feel involved. And it did. A little too involved. From early on, she started asking about names. Ben and I hadn't chosen one yet, we were still just enjoying the idea of a baby existing, period, but she'd text me random suggestions constantly. Some were sweet. Some were wildly not my style. And one name kept popping up, Lila. Rachel had a daughter named Lila. Stillborn at 36 weeks. It happened 5 years ago, and she's never been the same since. None of us have, really. It was a grief so sharp it made the air feel heavy. We all grieved her in different ways. Rachel went quiet for a while, then louder than ever. She started volunteering at pregnancy loss support groups. She talked about Lila constantly. I knew naming my daughter Lila would mean something to her. But Ben and I wanted our own name, one that didn't carry that weight. We talked about it a lot. And I told Rachel gently, maybe too gently, that we wouldn't be naming the baby Lila. She didn't say much. Just nodded and said, of course. But I felt something shift. Something small but noticeable, like a door closing quietly in the background. As the pregnancy went on, she backed off from the name talk. I thought maybe she had made peace with it. She was still involved, always texting, always checking in, but there was a tension I couldn't quite place. When I finally gave birth, it was a blur of exhaustion and joy and pain and wonder. Eliana was born on a rainy Tuesday morning. I texted Rachel from the hospital a few hours later with the announcement and a photo. She didn't reply for 6 hours. When she finally did, it was just beautiful. Can't wait to meet her. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe she was busy. Maybe it hurt to see someone else's baby when she'd lost her own. I gave her grace, even though I felt a little knot forming in my gut. I had no idea what was coming. It started 2 weeks later, at a small family gathering at our house. Rachel came, brought gifts, cooed over Eliana like nothing was wrong. Then my cousin showed up and said, I saw Rachel's post. Lila is such a beautiful name. It suits her. I blinked. What? Your daughter. Lila, right? I looked at Rachel. She smiled, sipped her wine, and said, oh, I just think of her as Lila. Isn't it perfect? I laughed. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She had posted a photo of Eliana on her Instagram without asking me and captioned it, Welcome to the world, baby Lila. Purple heart, my heart is full again. My heart dropped into my stomach. That was only the beginning. After my cousin left, I excused myself and went to the bathroom, phone in hand. I felt like the room was spinning, like I was in some weird alternate version of my life. I pulled up Rachel's Instagram. There it was. A photo of Eliana, asleep in her bassinet. Not just any photo, one I'd sent Rachel privately. I'd never posted it myself. She must have saved it from our texts. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, baby Lila." Purple heart, my heart is full again. Hundreds of likes. Comments from people we knew. She's beautiful, Ratch. So happy for you. Little angel. Lila lives on. People thought this was her baby. Or at the very least, that I'd named my baby after hers. I stood there for what felt like years, my mouth dry, my fingers trembling. I wasn't even sure what emotion was winning: rage, shock, heartbreak. Maybe all of them at once. I went back out and asked Rachel to come talk to me in the kitchen. She followed me, still smiling like we were about to have a friendly little chat. And for a moment, I tried to stay calm. I told her I saw the post. I told her I wasn't okay with it. Her face dropped, but not with shame, more like confusion. Like she didn't understand why I was making a big deal. "Anna," she said, "you know what that name means to me." I wasn't trying to overstep. It felt right. She's not your daughter, Rachel. She's family. She's part of Lila's story now. "No," I said, louder. "She's not a vessel for your grief. She's a person. And her name is Eliana." Rachel started crying then. Real tears, not crocodile ones. I believe she was genuinely emotional. But that didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. Like I was the one causing pain by asserting a boundary I had every right to set. She apologized. Kind of. She said she would take the post down if it meant that much to me. But she never said she was wrong. And then, when I said I needed space, she stormed out. She didn't say goodbye to Ben. She didn't even look back at the baby. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next day, I started getting messages. A couple of Rachel's friends, mutual acquaintances from high school, reached out. One said, "Hey, just wanted you to know Rachel's hurting a lot. She thought naming the baby that way was a tribute. Hope you're not being too harsh." Another said, "You really could have handled it more delicately. She lost a child, remember?" And then, my mother called. Mom's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I recognized well. She said Rachel was devastated. That she hadn't meant harm. That I could have been a little more understanding. "You know how much Lila meant to her," Mom said. "Maybe there's a way to compromise. Maybe let her call Eliana Lila in private, just between them." I almost laughed. "Mom," I said, "are you listening to yourself? That's not a nickname. That's not a pet name. That's another identity. She's grieving. I just had a baby." It hit me then how deeply Rachel's pain still dictated our family dynamic. How quickly everyone tiptoed around her, even if it meant trampling over someone else. Over me. Ben was furious. He wanted to block Rachel on everything. But I wasn't ready for that. I didn't want a war. I just wanted distance. So I sent Rachel a message. Calm. Measured. I said I loved her, but I needed her to respect my boundaries. That if she wanted a relationship with Eliana, it had to be on our terms. That she couldn't rewrite our choices to suit her pain. She didn't respond. Instead, she posted another story. A quote graphic that said, "Some people erase your memories because they can't handle your truth." It didn't tag me. It didn't name me. But I felt it like a slap. Then came the family group chat drama. My aunt chimed in with a vague "family should stick together" message. My dad texted me privately saying he understood my side, but that I might regret pushing Rachel away. That life is short and babies grow up. I stopped replying for a while. I just couldn't do it. A week later, Rachel showed up at our house. Unannounced. I was breastfeeding Eliana when I heard the knock. Ben opened the door. Rachel pushed past him, carrying a bag of baby clothes. She said, "I just wanted to drop these off. I know you're upset. But I'm still her aunt." I stood up slowly, Eliana cradled in my arms, and told her she needed to leave. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Anna, come on. Don't do this." Ben stepped between us. "You heard her." Rachel left without another word. I cried for an hour after that. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want this rift. But I couldn't pretend nothing happened. I couldn't let her rewrite reality around her pain. Because if I let that happen now, what would come next? The silence after Rachel left my house was heavier than any shouting match could have been. The kind of silence that wraps around you, pressing down, amplifying every breath, every creak in the floorboards. I kept replaying the scene in my head, her voice, that wounded look she gave me, Ben stepping in front of her. I felt like a villain in my own home, even though some part of me still knew I'd done what I had to. Ben tried to comfort me, but I could tell he was frustrated. Not just with Rachel, but with my family in general. He never said it outright, he knew it wasn't the time, but I could see it written all over his face. "Why do they always do this to you?" I didn't have a good answer. Growing up, my family was good at appearances. We did birthdays, Sunday dinners, holiday photos. From the outside, we looked functional, even tight-knit. But underneath all that, there were unwritten rules. Rachel's grief had only solidified them. Rule number 1, don't make Rachel upset. Rule number 2, if Rachel is upset, fix it fast. Rule number 3, if you're upset about Rachel being upset, keep it to yourself. Even as I became an adult, got married, built a home, that script still echoed. So when I broke it, really broke it, by kicking her out, it was like the whole system buckled. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it crept in. My mom stopped calling for a few days, which was unusual for her. When she finally did, it was stiff. "Just checking in. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Eliana's good." Long pause. "Your sister hasn't stopped crying." I didn't respond to that. I wasn't going to carry Rachel's feelings on top of my own anymore. "She's the one who crossed a line, Mom." "I know. But do you think maybe you overreacted?" I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. A few days later, I saw another social media post. A photo of Rachel's old ultrasound, Lila's. The caption read, "Not forgotten. Not replaced. Just always in my heart." She was weaponizing her grief now. Turning it into a shield and a sword. Ben suggested blocking her. Not just on social media, but fully. He said, "This isn't healthy, Anna. You need space to heal and bond with Eliana without this storm constantly rolling in." I knew he was right. But it felt like cutting off a limb. Rachel was still my sister. A complicated, grief-stricken, infuriating sister. Part of me still hoped she'd wake up one day, realize what she did, and apologize, really apologize. Instead, I got an email. Subject, "I'm not the enemy." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The message was long. Rachel explained how seeing me become a mother brought up everything she'd lost. How she felt like no one in the family remembered Lila anymore. How naming Eliana Lila in her post wasn't an attempt to steal or erase, it was an attempt to keep her daughter's memory alive. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she wrote. "But I won't apologize for loving your daughter. I thought you'd understand." That line stuck in my chest. I showed Ben. He scoffed. "She's justifying it. Again. She thinks I'm the one who doesn't get it. That's because she doesn't see where she ends and others begin." I didn't write back. Instead, I started therapy. It was something I'd meant to do during pregnancy but kept putting off. Now it felt urgent. The therapist, a woman in her 40s with a calm presence and a no-nonsense tone, listened patiently as I unloaded the whole situation. "It sounds like your family has built a culture around managing Rachel's grief," she said. "And now that you've broken rank, there's backlash." I didn't want to be cruel. "You weren't. You were clear. There's a difference." That word, clear, hit me like a bomb. I wasn't cruel. I was just done being steamrolled. I didn't go no contact with Rachel, but I stopped initiating anything. No texts. No updates. No photos of Eliana. And then came Easter. My parents always hosted a big family brunch. I wasn't sure if we'd go, but then my mom called and asked directly. I want you there, Anna. Please. Ben was against it. He said it was too soon, too raw. But I felt weirdly calm about it. Maybe it was the therapy. Maybe I just needed to see it through. We went. Rachel was already there, sitting with our aunt and making polite conversation like nothing had happened. Her smile flickered when she saw me holding Eliana. We didn't speak for the first hour. But then, in the middle of passing the fruit salad, she looked up and said, "She's getting so big." I nodded. She is. What's she into these days? It was such a normal question that I didn't know how to respond. I told her Eliana liked music. That she calmed down when we played classical piano. That she was starting to giggle. Rachel smiled, soft and a little sad. Lila used to do that, too. And just like that, the air changed again. Ben reached over and took my hand under the table. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew I couldn't let her drag me back into that space where my daughter existed as a placeholder for her grief. Not again. After Easter, something shifted. Not with Rachel. Not exactly. She didn't reach out. Didn't text. But the silence wasn't antagonistic. It was like we were both quietly walking along a fence line, each on our own side, keeping pace but not crossing. For the first time in months, I wasn't constantly bracing for the next explosion. Ben was relieved. Maybe this is it, he said. Maybe she finally got the message. I wasn't sure. I didn't think Rachel got anything unless it aligned with her narrative. But I was grateful for the quiet. Eliana was teething, and I had enough going on. Between the sleepless nights and the emotional hangover from the holidays, I was barely functioning. Still, the idea of closure lingered. Not the kind that comes from reconciliation or dramatic apologies, but the internal kind where you stop hoping the other person changes and start focusing on what you can actually control. In therapy, I talked about the name again. I hadn't in a while, but it kept popping up in small, unexpected moments. At the pediatrician's office when they called Eliana and I flinched, half expecting someone to say, "Isn't she Lila?" Or when a distant cousin sent us a gift labeled "to baby Lila," even though I'd corrected them weeks before. I feel like Rachel branded my child, I told my therapist. Like there's this ghost version of her identity floating around and I'm constantly swatting it away. She nodded. It's not just about the name. It's about your right to define your reality. Yes. That was it. Ben and I decided to do something small but meaningful. We printed a set of birth announcements. We hadn't done them originally, we were too overwhelmed, but now it felt important. We picked out a design we loved, wrote a short, heartfelt message, and had them sent to all our friends and extended family. Introducing Eliana Grace, it read. Born into love. Raised in truth. Rachel didn't acknowledge the announcement. But a week later, she unfollowed me on Instagram. Not blocked. Just unfollowed. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so, her. Dramatic silence instead of dialogue. Passive closure instead of conversation. A month passed. Then, my mom called with news. Rachel was moving. A new job offer out of state. She'd been considering it for a while, apparently, and finally made the leap. She didn't tell me, I said. She didn't tell anyone until she signed the lease, Mom replied. You're not the only one she's been distant with. I felt a weird cocktail of emotions. Relief. Sadness. Anger. A kind of hollow victory. I asked Mom if Rachel had said anything about Eliana. No, she said. But, she packed up Lila's nursery. That hit harder than I expected. For years, Rachel had kept that room intact, soft pastel walls, crib untouched, even though 5 years had passed. It had been her shrine and her shelter. That she was letting it go felt huge. She said she needed to stop living in the in-between, Mom added. She's finally grieving in a different way. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel happy for her or wary. 3 days before Rachel's move, she texted me. Would it be okay if I saw Eliana before I go? I stared at the message for a long time. I showed it to Ben. He didn't say no. But he didn't look thrilled either. She hasn't earned anything, he said. But if you feel like you need this for yourself, I support you. I thought about it all night. And the next morning, I replied. 1 hour. At our house. No photos. No talk about her name. She agreed. Rachel showed up wearing a long coat and carrying a bag of books for Eliana. She looked tired, smaller somehow. Not physically, but energetically. Like she'd finally stopped trying to take up all the space in the room. Eliana was on her playmat, chewing on a plastic giraffe, oblivious to the quiet tension between her mother and aunt. Rachel sat down cross-legged on the floor and didn't say a word for several minutes. Then she whispered, "She looks like you did." I nodded. She didn't mention Lila. Didn't say Lila would've, or Lila should've, she just talked about Eliana. How she moved. How she smiled. How she was learning to roll over. It was the most present I'd seen Rachel in years. When the hour was up, she stood and said, "Thanks for letting me come. I won't reach out for a while. I think we both need air." I walked her to the door. As she stepped outside, she turned back and added, "I really am sorry. For all of it." It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't detailed or tearful. But it was something. After she left, I sat down with Eliana and held her close. I whispered her name, Eliana, 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 like a spell, like a tether, like a promise. That night, I dreamed of a garden. 2 trees growing side by side. One was tall, its trunk scarred and twisting. The other was smaller, newer, blooming pink and wild. They didn't touch, but they shared the same soil. I think that's what healing is. Not blending. Not forgetting. But growing separately in the same earth. Rachel moved a week after our last visit. True to her word, she didn't message me. Not a text, not a photo react, not a vague post online I had to decipher like a social media landmine. It was just quiet. Ben kept asking how I felt about that, and honestly, I didn't know how to answer. Part of me felt relieved. Another part, well, maybe a little lonely. Not for her exactly, but for the idea of having a sister the way people talk about having sisters, one you can call without calculating your words, one who doesn't make everything orbit around her. The house felt lighter, though. Like some pressure valve had finally been released. Eliana was sleeping better. So were we. And I'd gotten back into journaling, something I hadn't done since the 3rd trimester. It started casually, just bits of feelings here and there. But one night, I found myself writing a letter I never planned to send. To Rachel. "You took something from me when you called her Lila." Not the name. Not really. But the certainty that my daughter's life was hers alone to define. I don't think you meant to steal it. I think you were drowning and grabbed the nearest thing to stay afloat. But I'm not a lifeboat. And Eliana is not your redemption. I closed the journal after that and cried quietly while Eliana napped on my chest. Sometimes the biggest grief isn't what someone does to you, it's what you let them do, over and over, before you finally stop it. A month passed. Then 2. Life settled into a rhythm. Morning feedings, music classes, slow weekends. Friends came by more often. My mother, too, tentatively reappeared in our lives. She started small, dropping off groceries, checking in with a cautious, "Only if you're up for a visit." I appreciated that. For once, she wasn't mediating. She was just present. It was during one of those visits that she brought up Rachel. Not with drama, not with guilt. Just as simple, she asked me if Eliana had started crawling yet. I blinked. She did? Mom nodded. She's still giving you space. But she still asks. It stirred something. Not forgiveness, exactly. But a softening. That night I wrote another letter. This time to Eliana. Your name is yours. I chose it because it means God has answered, and you are our answer to so many quiet, aching prayers. You are not a replacement. You are not a symbol. You are a whole person with a story that begins and grows and unfolds on its own. After writing it, I printed it and tucked it inside her baby book. Maybe she'll read it one day. Maybe she won't need to. Spring came. Rachel didn't return. But she did email. Short and careful. Just wondering if Eliana has a favorite book yet. I'd love to send one if that's okay. Ben and I sat on the couch that night, reading the email aloud like it was a contract. He looked at me and said, "Do you want to respond?" "I think I do," I said. But not yet. Instead, I wrote a third letter. This one was different. It wasn't full of grief or anger. It was just true. Rachel. I don't hate you. I still don't fully trust you. But I believe you're trying. And I believe I'm allowed to protect my peace and still love you at the same time. If you want to be part of Eliana's life, you'll have to let her be herself. That includes her name. I didn't send it. But I didn't burn it either. The next time Mom visited, she brought a package. It was wrapped in brown paper, no return address. Inside was a children's book. The World Needs Who You Were Made to Be by Joanna Gaines. There was no inscription. Just a sticky note tucked inside. If she likes it, I'll send more. No pressure. I showed it to Ben. He said, "That's the closest she'll ever come to asking permission." We read it to Eliana that night. She giggled at the page with the girl in aviator goggles. And I felt something start to mend. Not perfectly. But enough. The next morning, I replied to the email. She loves books with colorful planes and animals. That one was a hit. Thank you for sending it the right way. Rachel responded with a single emoji, dove. And for now, that's enough. By midsummer, Rachel and I had settled into a strange rhythm. We weren't friends again, not like before. But there was a quiet, careful truce. She'd send the occasional book for Eliana or forward a funny parenting meme with a neutral thought of you. I'd respond, sometimes hours or days later, always brief but civil. We were orbiting the same sun again, but at safe distances. Ben was wary. "She's testing the waters," he said one night while we were folding laundry. "Just don't let her wade back in like nothing happened." I knew he wasn't saying it out of resentment. He was saying it because he'd seen what the first wave did to me and he didn't want to repeat. But I also knew that people change. Sometimes. Slowly. Awkwardly. Not because we want them to, but because something inside them starts to shift. That's what it felt like with Rachel. Not transformation. But motion. And then, in late July, she asked if we'd like to FaceTime. Just to say hi. Just to see Eliana smile. It took me a day to answer. I don't know why. Fear, maybe. Not of drama, but of disappointment. That she'd say the wrong thing. Or that I would. That it would bring back too much. But when we called, it was normal. Rachel smiled from her small kitchen in her new apartment. She waved at Eliana and made exaggerated silly faces. Eliana, now 8 months old and full of opinions, giggled and kicked and tried to eat the phone. Rachel didn't cry. She didn't reference Lila. She just watched, her voice soft. "She's so full of light," she said. And I believed her. After that, the calls became monthly. Not frequent, but enough. A safe cadence. And through them, I saw pieces of Rachel I hadn't seen in years. Not just the bossy big sister or the grieving mother, but the human beneath the armor. She talked about her new job working with at-risk youth in a city that didn't know her past. She said it was hard, but good. She was building something from scratch. No shadows. No comparisons. Just forward. Once, toward the end of a call, she asked, "Do you think there's a way back?" I knew what she meant. Back to what? I asked. To being us. I didn't answer right away. I looked at Eliana chewing on a plastic ring and thought about all that had passed between Rachel and me. The boundaries drawn. The lines crossed. The names whispered. There's no back, I finally said. But maybe there's a different forward. She nodded. That night, I told Ben. He was quiet. Then he said, I trust you. But don't trust the version of her you wish she was. Trust the one she shows you now. I carried that with me. In August, Rachel visited. A short weekend. She stayed at a hotel, which I appreciated. She didn't bring gifts. She brought herself, and a quiet sort of attention that felt new. The second night, after Eliana was asleep, we sat on the back porch with tea. The air was thick and warm, summer buzzing around us. I've wanted to say something for a long time, she said. I waited. When you named her Eliana, I felt like the last piece of Lila vanished. Like everyone moved on, and I couldn't. I think I tried to put her into your story so I wouldn't lose her completely. I didn't speak. Not because I was angry, but because she was finally naming it. I'm sorry, she said. Not just for the post. For using your moment to fill my emptiness. I looked at her, really looked. And I said, you didn't lose her because I didn't name my daughter after her. You lost her because she died. That loss is real. But Eliana's life isn't a replacement. And I won't let anyone treat it like one. She nodded, eyes glassy. We sat in silence for a while after that. Later, when she hugged me goodbye at the door, it wasn't a dramatic moment. No tears. No grand declarations. Just a quiet, thanks for letting me come. When she left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. Watching the night. Breathing in the stillness. Inside, Eliana stirred in her crib. I walked to her room, touched her cheek, and whispered her name. The only name she's ever had. And the only one she'll ever need. By the time Eliana turned 1, our lives had settled into a rhythm I didn't think possible a year earlier. Not perfect. Never that. But calm. Steady. The party was small family, a few close friends, some neighborhood parents we'd grown to like. We had balloons, cake, a bubble machine that Eliana was both terrified of and obsessed with. Ben grilled. My mom brought her signature pasta salad. Ellie, our golden retriever, hovered for dropped food. And Rachel came. She arrived with a single gift, a photo book. No drama. No big speech. Just a soft, I hope it's okay. Inside were candid pictures of Eliana I hadn't seen, ones I'd texted in passing or maybe forgotten I'd even sent. And mixed between them, quotes about growth, about identity. The last page said, Eliana Grace, a name as strong as the girl who carries it. I looked up, and Rachel didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Ben saw it too. He gave her a quiet nod. Not forgiveness. Not forgetfulness. Just acknowledgement. Sometimes, that's enough. After everyone left and Eliana was asleep, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and that photo book in my lap. The living room was messy, wrapping paper everywhere, frosting on the rug, but I didn't care. It was the kind of mess that came from joy. And then I remembered the version of me, exactly a year ago, lying in a hospital bed, still bleeding, still sore, staring at my phone and reading Rachel's post, "Welcome to the world, baby Lila." It felt like a lifetime ago. So much of early motherhood is about becoming. But for me, it was also about unbecoming, the parts of myself that had been defined by tiptoeing around someone else's grief, someone else's rules, someone else's pain. Naming Eliana wasn't just an act of parenting. It was the first thing I ever truly did for myself, without asking for approval. And defending that name was the first time I refused to be small. Later that week, Rachel sent me a voice note. We rarely used voice messages, which made it stand out. Her voice was slow, thoughtful. She said, "I still think about Lila every day. That will never stop. But I've stopped trying to bring her back through other people. I get now that honoring her doesn't mean holding on so tightly I hurt the people still here." Pause. Thank you for not letting me turn your daughter into a ghost. I sat with that for a while. Then I recorded a message back. She's not a ghost. She's your daughter. She always will be. Just like Eliana is mine. We both get to hold them how we need to. But we don't get to take them from each other. She never replied. She didn't need to. In therapy, I talked about what came next. Not the big things, no dramatic rebuild of a sisterhood, no sudden switch to perfect understanding, but the dailiness of it. Letting Rachel exist in my life without letting her overpower it. Letting her love Eliana without confusing that love for ownership. My therapist asked me a simple question: do you still feel afraid of her? I thought about it. The answer came slowly. No. I think I used to be scared that loving her meant disappearing. But now I know it doesn't. I can love her and still hold my shape. Fall came. Leaves changed. Eliana took her first steps on a Tuesday afternoon while Ben was at work. I caught it on video and sent it to the family group chat. Everyone responded. Even Rachel. Her message was short: look at her go. Grace suits her. That might seem small. But it felt big. Because for the first time, she didn't rename what she saw. She let it be what it was. Eliana Grace. Our daughter. Our joy. Our beginning. The first year of Eliana's life closed with a photo album on the shelf, a party that didn't end in tears, and a family that, while not perfect, felt more whole than I would have thought possible. It wasn't the fairy tale ending I once hoped for. It was messy, but it was real. In October, Rachel emailed me again. No subject line. No body text. Just an attachment. A scan drawing, crayon and marker on white printer paper, childlike and a little uneven. It was a butterfly. Underneath, it said in big, careful handwriting, "To Eliana, love from Lila's mama." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it made me angry. But because it didn't. It was grief, offered like a folded note passed under a locked door. I printed it and taped it to the back of Eliana's closet, inside a small keepsake box. Alongside the hospital bracelet, the first pair of socks she wore, the announcement card we sent out. It didn't belong on display. But it didn't belong in the trash either. Because however much I'd fought it, Rachel's pain is part of our story now. Not the center. But a thread in the tapestry. In November, Rachel came back for Thanksgiving. Our parents hosted again. It was low-key, fewer people, less fanfare. Everyone had learned their lesson, I think, about pretending nothing had ever gone wrong. Eliana was in the exploratory phase, climbing everything, pulling on people's sleeves, dropping Cheerios like trail markers wherever she went. Rachel was careful around her. Gentle, but restrained. She didn't pick her up unless invited. She didn't offer unsolicited advice. At one point, I saw her watching Eliana from the doorway of the kitchen. Just watching. Her face unreadable. I walked over and asked if she was okay. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. I used to think grief was something I carried. But now I see it's also something I passed on. And I don't want to do that anymore. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I poured us both tea and said, "You can still honor Lila without wrapping her around Eliana." She nodded. I know that now. It wasn't an apology. It was something quieter. Something that felt closer to a vow. In December, we decorated our house for the holidays. Eliana helped, or rather, she undid everything I did, but we laughed through it. Ben and I decided to start a tradition, one ornament a year, chosen specifically to reflect something meaningful. This year, I picked a ceramic tile that said, "Your name matters." I didn't explain it to anyone. But every time I looked at it, I felt grounded. Rachel sent her own ornament in the mail, a small, wooden heart, painted white, with Eliana's name in gold cursive. Not Lila. Not a quote. Just the truth. One night after the new year, I was sorting through photos on my laptop when I came across a video I hadn't seen in months. It was from the week after Eliana was born, Rachel holding her in the hospital room, rocking her gently. In the background, you can hear me saying, "That's Aunt Rachel," and Rachel murmuring, "Hello, little one." She doesn't say Lila. She doesn't rename her. She just holds her, like something delicate and alive. I watched the video twice. And then I closed the laptop and sat in silence for a while. Because sometimes we only remember the loudest parts of the story, the betrayal, the fight, the tears. But there are other moments, too. Small ones. Honest ones. Versions of people we forget existed because pain screamed louder. I think the real work of healing is choosing which version you keep. I'm not saying I've forgotten what Rachel did. Or that I excuse it. But I'm not living in that moment anymore. I've decided to keep the version where she's trying. Where she learns. Where she names things carefully, and only when invited. Eliana's language is growing fast now. She babbles and points and mimics. The other day she said Ray Ray, and I realized she meant Rachel. I texted Rachel to tell her. She didn't respond with a heart emoji or a joke. She just replied. That's her name for me. I'll keep it safe. By the time spring rolled around again, Eliana was running. Not walking, running, with all the reckless confidence of someone who had no idea they could fall. Her knees were constantly bruised, her hands always sticky, her hair in that perpetual toddler tangle that no brush could tame for more than 30 seconds. Rachel came to visit in March. She didn't ask to stay with us, and I didn't offer. But she booked a hotel nearby, and this time, the visit didn't come with tension. It came with pancakes. She arrived early, unannounced, with a bag from the local diner, banana pancakes, orange juice, syrup. For the chaos team, she said, and Eliana clapped her hands like she understood the joke. It was easy. That morning was easy. She didn't ask to hold Eliana, but when Eliana climbed into her lap with a sticky fork, she held her just fine. Later, while Ben cleaned up and Eliana played with measuring cups on the floor, Rachel and I sat on the back steps. I'm thinking about writing again, she said. Not about Lila. Just about now. About where I am. I nodded. That sounds good. She tapped her mug, like she was hesitating. Do you think I deserve to tell that story? After everything? I looked at her for a long time. And then I said, yes. But only if you don't write anyone else's name into it without asking. She laughed. A real, short, sharp laugh. Fair. We didn't say much else. But we didn't need to. A few weeks later, Rachel sent Eliana a set of alphabet blocks. The letter E block had tiny hand-painted butterflies on it. I didn't point it out. Neither did she. Some things don't need to be said twice. And yet, even as things got better, I found myself slipping into old habits sometimes. Worrying if I was being too harsh. Too guarded. Too distant. One night, I confessed this to Ben. We were lying in bed, the monitor crackling with Eliana's soft breathing. I still feel guilty sometimes, I whispered. Like I'm holding a grudge I should have let go of already. He turned toward me. That's not guilt. That's trauma memory. Your body remembers how it felt to be erased. Your fear isn't about now, it's about making sure it doesn't happen again. I let that sit. Do you think I'll always feel this way? I asked. He shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe you'll just get better at recognizing it for what it is. That weekend, I saw a therapist for the first time in months. A check-in, not a crisis. Progress in itself. We talked about Rachel. About how the absence of conflict sometimes felt unsettling. Peace can be unfamiliar, she said. Especially when your nervous system was trained to expect disruption. She asked if I'd ever told Rachel how close I'd come to cutting her off for good. No, I said. I didn't want to hurt her. Or you didn't want her to think she'd lost her power over you. That hit deep. Because the truth was, for all her control, all her insistence, Rachel had scared me. Not in a physical sense. But in the way someone can scare you when they rewrite reality and everyone else goes along with it. That's what the name thing was, really. A rewrite. And I had finally said, not this time. In April, Eliana started daycare part-time. I cried the first day I dropped her off. So did she. Rachel texted me out of the blue, "You okay?" I said, "Not even a little." She replied with a gif of a screaming cartoon child. "She'll be president by lunch." I laughed. Out loud. It was the kind of sister moment I hadn't had with her in years. On Eliana's second birthday, Rachel sent a card with a note inside. I used to think I needed your child to carry my grief. Now I see she carries something else entirely. Joy. And I'm just grateful to know her. No dramatics. No overstepping. Just gratitude. Ben read it and looked at me. How do you feel? Like maybe we're in the middle of something that's finally growing in the right direction. He nodded. Just remember, boundaries don't mean walls. They mean foundations. I saved the card. Not in the baby box. In my own journal. Because healing belongs to all of us, not just the ones who were hurt, but also the ones willing to learn how not to hurt us again. I sometimes wonder what people would think if they heard the story out of context. My sister tried to rename my baby behind my back, and I kicked her out of my house. It sounds dramatic. Like something from a soap opera. But the truth was far more ordinary and far more devastating. Because it wasn't about one Instagram post. Or one name. It was about the history behind it. The silence that followed it. The ways families bend and break around grief until no one's sure where their edges begin and end. And it was about choosing, finally, to protect something new instead of managing something old. That choice changed everything. Now, with time, it all feels further away. Not gone. But quieter. Like a bruise you've stopped pressing just to see if it still hurts. Eliana is 2.5 now. Fierce. Funny. Kind. She names everything, her stuffed animals, the moon, the ants in the backyard. Names, to her, are everything. They're how she makes sense of the world. And I see now, more than ever, how sacred that is. How wrong it would have been to let someone else take that from her before she ever had a chance to claim it. Rachel visits about once a season. Sometimes more. She stays at a nearby Airbnb. She brings books, tiny boots, finger puppets, and a kind of gentleness I never thought I'd associate with her again. She asks first. Always. Would it be okay if I? And I say yes. Or no. And she listens. That's the difference. We talk more, too. Not just about Eliana. About our childhood. About the parts we both misremember. About the places we each carried pain and never looked directly at it. One evening, while Eliana slept and we drank tea on my porch, Rachel said, "You know, I thought having Eliana in my life would fix something in me. That she'd be the answer. But it turns out she's just joy. Uncomplicated joy. And that's better than what I wanted." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Later that night, I wrote in my journal. She stopped trying to make meaning out of Eliana. She's letting her be a person. That's the most respectful kind of love there is. I still have days where I flinch. Where a memory hits and I question myself. Did I go too far? Was it really so terrible? Should I have been more understanding? But then I remember that day, the look on Rachel's face when I told her to leave. And I remember how Eliana's name felt heavy in my chest that night, like it needed to be defended, not just from Rachel, but from a pattern. A pattern of silence. Of shrinking. Of letting things slide in the name of family. I broke that pattern. And I don't regret it. Because now, when Eliana points to herself in the mirror and says, "I'm Eliana," with her full voice and her full being, I know she's standing in a truth that was protected long before she could speak it. That's what parenting is, I think. Not just shaping someone new, but shielding them long enough for them to become who they already are. Rachel still has hard days. So do I. But we name them now. We don't bury them under pleasantries or obligations. And that's the final part of the story I want to leave here. Naming is powerful. Not just for babies. For moments. For harm. For healing. Names matter because they tell the truth. And Eliana Grace is the truth I chose. And kept. And protected. Not because I had to fight someone off. But because, for the first time, I didn't walk away from myself to keep someone else from breaking. So yes. My sister once tried to rename my child. And I stopped her. And because I did, we found our way back to each other, slowly, carefully, honestly. And Eliana? She just kept growing. In her own name. In her own light. Exactly as it should be.